You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinesic.
Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinesic. Welcome to episode 191. And Fran, we were just remarking how far we've come and how close we are to episode 200 coming up. So
I still can't believe we get to do this.
Yeah.
It's kind of because it's something we both love to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't believe it still works.
Yeah.
I guess
and
I feel thankful.
Yeah. With all the topics that we've covered, how many more that there are to cover, and
with the there's more competition out there. There's plenty of podcasts for everyone to listen to.
Yeah,
we've even told you which ones to listen to.
And there's a bunch of folks that we want to talk to again. So I don't know if we'll ever run out of potential topics. We may get bored at some point.
Did you ever have
tired of it?
I know this is off track already. We haven't even introduced our guests, but did you ever have a goal of how far you wanted it to go? Like I always kind of felt like if we could hit 5 years. And then it ended, I'd be thrilled.
No, I wouldn't say so.
All right. I just wanted
when it finished, it was finished.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I just, at this point, with where we're at, it's got to hit 5 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's not that far away.
It's a little over a year. We're going to hit 4 years next month.
Yeah. So anyway, we have a really fun guest today. A recommendation from a former podcast guest from Bowman's Hill Wildflower Center, or Wildflower Preserve, Santina Lauricella. And so I'd like to introduce Amanda Crook of Locust Light Farm. And Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Locust Light Farm?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Fran and Tom, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Anytime.
I am an herbalist. I grow herbs. I make herbal medicines, and I teach herbalism classes both online and in person. I've been working with plants my whole adult life. I began as a veggie farmer, and then I started my business as an herb farm. And then I scaled down to be an herbal teaching garden where I could have hands-on classes in the garden. And then I added in online classes into that mix. I'm currently between properties. My lease on the former property ended, and I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to start yet another farm until I owned the land, so it could be the forever farm. So working on that project at the moment. So I'm primarily an herbalism teacher. I also do what I call, I write what I call ecological fiction, which is imaginative fiction that hopefully helps people to learn about ecological relationships, but also helps people to have that fun, empathetic imagination about the natural world.
Awesome. Well, you have two very willing students here today, and hopefully very many more listening. And I find it interesting that, again, this is a topic, we talked about it beforehand, but that I know very little about. What I find interesting about that is that we're constantly talking about Native American uses for native plants and all the ways they were used as medicine or food and things like that. And it's not that I don't find interest in it. I'm afraid to go down that rabbit hole because I'm afraid I'll get way too interested in it. But I really am interested in learning more. I don't want to speak for Tom, but I think he feels the same way because your brother is pretty into it.
Yeah, no, my brother's very into it. In fact, he was drinking some I don't want to call it foraged, but some tea that he made from plants that he collected. Now, I don't want to call it foraged because it was plants that he grew that he specifically picked off. It wasn't like he just found them. He harvested it, yeah. But echinacea, monarda, all that kind of stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So we're really excited, and just for our listeners, just like a brief, what is herbalism? Like just like a small definition and what it means to you and how it is part of you.
Herbalism is using plants to make yourself feel better. So if you're someone who you get a stomach ache or maybe you ate too much and then you decide to make a cup of peppermint tea, you're doing herbalism. If you feel a cold coming on and you decide to make, a soup and then chop up a lot of fresh garlic and throw it in at the end so you're getting some raw garlic, you're doing herbalism. So herbalism is something that used to be ubiquitous. Like everyone used to have familiarity with at least a few herbs that they could use just to keep yourself well. And then there probably would be someone who had, a little more knowledge in every, say, family or in every town. So herbalism can be very simple, taking care of yourself. And then it can also become more complex in the realm of clinical herbalism, using herbalism for more complex health issues. And so it can be something that you get really nerdy about and learn a lot about. And, something I love about herbalism is there's so many ways you can go deeper with it. You could go deeper into phytochemistry. You could go deeper into different schools of herbalism, right? There's Western herbalism. There's also Ayurveda. There's traditional Chinese herbalism. So there's different schools of herbalism. Or you could go deeper into learning about botany, or medicine making, so there's, if you're someone who really loves to study and really loves to learn, herbalism's a great field because you're never going to know everything. And for some people, that's exciting. Like even listening to your podcast, like for me, I'm always wanting to learn more about ecological relationships and insects and plants and all that. And that's not something I know a lot about. I basically take the minimum I know about it so that I can write stories about it. But that's the thing that I really would like to learn about always more.
Awesome. Well, this is a great relationship right here then. That's a great give and take. I know and this is something I've talked about all the time, but I know my wife has a different relationship with herbalism growing up in Poland. It was a lot more part of her culture. Mm-hmm. So it's something that she still practices. I think it's funny, not funny, but it's like she pickles her own ginger. She does all these things that she'll have a slice of ginger every day. That's part of her morning routine. And it's just things that I didn't grow up with or didn't have knowledge of or didn't have any connection with, where I take a lot from her. I'm curious, as a teacher, as you're teaching this, how knowledgeable are the people that are coming to you? Do you feel like a lot, because I feel like a lot of what I do know has been handed down through my family over time. Mm-hmm. Do you feel a lot of that information has been lost, or are we in a time where there's a greater connection, or people searching for a greater connection?
It's definitely been lost, which leads to the search aspect of the greater connection. I think the places where the knowledge is more retained in this country is recent immigrants, because just people, and I would say it seems to me basically every other culture have retained more of that connection. And in this particular country, that connection has been more lost. So I would say it's, most people who come to my classes are either people who are beginners, or they've done a lot of solo study where they're reading books or maybe taking online classes on their own. But again, the world of herbalism can be really overwhelming. And so even if you're reading a lot or taking classes on your own, it can be nice to go to an in-person class or some sort of longer program just to help you, just to consolidate other information you might have learned and to realize, what's essential and what are the foundations, or what are, I often think when I teach now, what are the main, almost if you think of systems or patterns or functions that people need to learn, because really there's limitless plants out there. And that is one of the main parts that can get overwhelming, is which plants, because wherever people live, there are plants, and where there's plants, there's herbalism. And so, and now in this globalized world, we, for better or worse, have access to plants from all over the world. And, that can just be very overwhelming. So learning kind of the basics, and then you learn, these, similar plants can be very analogous. You don't need to know 300 plants. I actually, in 2023, created a whole course based on this idea that you can just know 13 plants and only use water. And you can basically mostly take care of yourself for the most part with 13 plants and water. You don't even need to get into tinctures or glycerites or oils or anything like that. You can really do a lot with fewer plants.
That's a great approach. Whenever, and this is definitely because I know so little about it, can be overwhelming. I always go back to when we had Samuel Thayer on, and I said, I know nothing about foraging and it's very overwhelming. And he goes, did you ever pick a blueberry? And I'm like, and he goes, okay, you foraged. You don't need to know every plant. You just need to know the one you're about to eat. So I was like, that's a great way to approach it. I don't have to learn every note on the keyboard. I just have to learn one and what it does and go from there. So I love that your approach is to narrow it down and make it less daunting, which I think takes a lot of the stress away from it immediately. Like, all right, I can do this. It makes it seem achievable.
Yeah.
So to kind of like take a step back, how did you find yourself on this path to herbalism? Was there an aha moment or something that kind of clicked with you that sparked your interest to take it to another level?
That's a great question. I can definitely tell you what the path was.
Okay.
I will say in my own life, I've come to believe that when something is a really good fit for a person, like when something is the right thing for you to be doing, it can almost be hard to remember how you got there in a way, because everything feels so natural along the way. And then suddenly in retrospect, this has been your life. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time outside and I was very interested in potion making for sure. I think the first real herbalism I would do was my mom's parents had a dairy farm, and my sister and I would take plantain leaf, which where I grew up we called plantain leaf, but we'd take plantain leaf and dandelion flowers because we both knew they were like good for you or herbs in some way. And we would mix them with the cow's feed and like try and feed it to the cows to like help them be healthier. And then my sister became a veterinarian and I became an herbalist.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah. It's almost like an inkling from a child, like you kind of knew without knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I was in college, I was planning on going to law school because I cared a lot about agricultural legislation and, firstly, like supporting farmers and supporting people who were dedicating their lives to producing food, because it's actually a very vulnerable way to live. And legislation can make that more or less vulnerable and more or less ecologically friendly. So I was interested in that. I was very interested in agricultural trade. And I felt like I knew what it felt like to be someone whose life was dependent on livestock because of my mother's parents. But I didn't know what it felt like to be someone whose life was dependent on vegetables. And I was really interested in trade with, Mexico and Central and South America. So I felt like I wanted to learn more about that. So I volunteered on an organic vegetable farm the summer after my freshman year in college, and I loved it. I grew up spending a lot of time outside and doing a lot of manual labor outside. But then in high school and college, I was just doing academic pursuits, and you kind of like stopped doing manual labor. And I love being outside. I loved being on a farm again. I loved that kind of work. And so every year when I was in school, I just kept doing farm internships instead of like the types of internships I maybe should have been doing. And actually it was on that first farm that someone taught me how to harvest nettle and dry nettle to drink for tea. Okay. So and that was maybe like the strongest spark of interest in herbalism. I must have been already interested in it in some degree for that person to teach me that. But when I got back to school, I started drinking nettle tea. And I used to be someone who had really bad indoor allergies, like disgusting, like always sneezing. Like I would have to, you're planning your day around like you're sneezing and grossness. And I noticed that on the days I drank nettle tea, I didn't sneeze at all.
Interesting.
Yes. And that was such a quality of life change that I became obsessed with nettle. I started buying every herb book I could find and basically became like a nettle evangelist to anyone who would listen about how nettle can help your allergies. And that I think started the herbal interest. So then even when I was still in school, I started doing a lot of reading books about herbalism, ordering bulk herbs online. I learned how to make tinctures. I learned how to make oils. And then when I left school, I became a vegetable farmer. But it still wasn't quite the right fit, I think, because I'm very extroverted. And so I loved working on a farm crew, but I just needed more of like what we would say now, like a platform. Though at the time that word wasn't in my consciousness. But I think just teaching a lot, like I need to teach, I need to talk to people. I need to be out there in order to really feel satisfied. And I like the work. So that's why, so right now I'm only teaching. I don't have a farm, but that blend of having a farm property where you can do that kind of work and be outside, and then also be doing a lot of teaching and bringing people together that has been a really good fit for me. Anyway, so I was doing a lot of soul searching and decided to start growing herbs because at the time, I just wasn't aware of as many farms that were growing herbs locally. And I had become to be very passionate about local food. And so I thought, well, but when I go make my herbal products, I'm going online to just buy herbs from anywhere. So that's where I got the idea to start growing herbs, and then the business evolved from there.
That's awesome. Tom, when I first started listening to Amanda talk about this, I'm thinking, oh, you may have a new recruit for, what is it that you're a member of, the young ag, young ag professionals?
Yeah, New Jersey Young Farmer and Ag Professionals. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Tom may be knocking on your door as a recruit. Sorry, didn't mean to sidetrack you there. Just with your passion, I was just like, oh, if I were recruiting people, I would know who to talk to. How do you, since making this discovery, because that's something that would, like, as someone that suffers with the allergies, if I found something that worked for me like that, I know that would be pretty life-changing for me. Mm-hmm. How do you feel since you dove into this? How has your life changed for you? Or was it something you've always kind of like embodied in a certain way, so it just enhanced it? Or is this something that like made a big change for you?
In terms of like my health?
It could be your health, or just it could be just who you are as a person.
I think herbalism has become suffused into every aspect of my life, really. So I had concurrently, I suppose, with that, already been interested in like just how to keep one's body well. Like I had done a yoga teacher training in college and became very interested in energy healing. And, I would like when I was growing up, I suppose, like if I look back, there were many plants that I was close to, but I didn't think of that as part of my identity as like someone who was into plants.
But this is more of a lifestyle now.
Yeah. And so herbalism, it can be a lifestyle, so like in our house, we're using herbs for everything. Like we're just having herbal tea all the time. We're cooking with herbs. The person I married is also a vegetable farmer who maybe wouldn't have called himself an herbalist, but was very interested in plants and now knows also a lot about herbs. And so it's just our whole life, it's deliciousness. It's basically, we really like it. We really structure our day around what we're drinking. We just drink delicious herbal beverages. And so we have that throughout the day, which is one of those things you don't notice about yourself until you travel or take a trip somewhere and suddenly you don't have that. And you're just thinking, wait a second, where's my next cup of tea? How am I going to get my next cup of tea?
Well, it's for the herbs that you're using for tea or cooking or medicine or health. Are you growing your own herbs? Are you foraging? Is it a combination? Are you purchasing? Like, is there a way to get everything that you need for what you do?
There would be a way to grow everything I need if I didn't love spices. I love spices. So mostly in the past I have grown it. This past year, again, I didn't have a garden. And so my husband put in what we called a family bed for us on his farm. And we grew, the herbs that we tend to use the most. And then I will buy herbs from other herb farms, or there's one company I'll buy herbs from online if I need to buy them, if I didn't grow it or whatnot. I don't tend to forage much. There's maybe a few things that I will forage. I don't forage a lot. And then otherwise spices. And I do care a lot about sourcing. I'll just throw a book recommendation out there. If anyone out there is interested, consumes herbs at all, whether it's just like, some celestial seasoning, sleepy time tea. There's a book that's called The Business of Botanicals by Am Armbrecht. And that's an excellent book about the herbal supply chain, which sounds boring. It's really very readable. It's an enjoyable book to read. I highly recommend it.
I'm going to put the link to it on our show notes for our listeners.
Yeah, so I really recommend that if you care. I think we should all care about the herbal supply chain. It's certainly important.
For you mentioned foraging, and I read an interesting blog post on your website, and I was just curious. I know because I read the blog post, but for our listeners, what your views on foraging are or is.
I have a few views on foraging. I think this is the, if I'm remembering the post you're referring to, is my one of my views is that I think when people think they're interested in foraging, what they're really interested in is botany and plant ID. Mm-hmm. And that's because, foraging sounds so romantic, it sounds so fun and like, I'm going to, be some sort of self-sustaining person who could just get food from nature. But really, I think what you want to do is to know how to identify plants. But I think most of us don't think that science is fun. I mean, including myself. Like it took really going down the herbal path for me to realize, oh, actually, this is what science is, and this is fun. But most people aren't out there thinking, I'd like to learn more about botany. But really, like a botany and plant ID or tree ID class, I think that is what a lot of people crave. But it's hard to find those, and it's hard to find plant walks, and it's a lot easier to find, say, books about foraging, which again also sounds more romantic and yummy.
Now, you've done plant walks at Bowman's Hill, correct? Wildflower Preserve? Have you done?
I've done one. Okay. It was a meadow walk.
All right, wonderful. Tom, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I actually just forgot what it was. But I think the gist of it was, no, I agree with you. A lot of people just have this really romantic view of foraging and don't realize you really need to know what you're doing. And it comes down to that botany and plant ID. If you don't have that, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think I shared on the podcast, it was probably like 2 months ago, my wife picked mushrooms from the backyard and said she was going to make this. I was like, "What? Do you know what mushrooms these are?" And she goes, "Oh, we had these in Poland." I'm like, "You're not in Poland. Yeah. Like it might look like something from Poland." And she goes, "No, I'm confident I'm going to make them." And I'm like, "Well, I'm going to let you eat them first." Yeah. Because there's no reason for both of us to go down.
Did you eat the mushrooms, Fran?
I did eat the mushrooms, yeah, after she ate them.
Yeah. And then what happened?
They were delicious. Yeah. She was absolutely right. But it was still a scary moment for me.
Yeah.
Even though she was confident, I wasn't very confident.
Yeah. And with a lot of that stuff, I think it's amazing how many of the plants are, I was going to say edible. I'll rephrase and say non-toxic. Like they're not going to hurt you, but you need it, and you might have to prepare them a certain way and or all that. Right. But like a lot of people are very scared, and this goes back to that discussion we had with Sam Thayer too. I think people are very scared of the plants outside and mushrooms and all that kind of stuff outside because it's a learned trait and it was taught on purpose in a sense to disconnect people from those traditions and food sources. Yeah.
People aren't just scared of plants outside. I mean, something I come across a lot is like people are just scared of herbal tea.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Really? Like there's a lot of people, I mean, not maybe in my bubble, but like if you just give someone like loose leaf herbal tea and it's not in a package, it could just genuinely frightening to some people.
Let alone be not in a package, but like not in the little bag that's then wrapped in paper and then in a box and then wrapped in plastic. And,
yes.
I completely agree. Earlier in something you were saying, it reminded me when I was cooking the other night, and I couldn't remember the ingredient, but it just came to me. I was making something for my son that had raisins in it. And I was like, I wonder how many people don't realize that raisins are from grapes. It was the whole like Sun-Made raisins. Remember how like the Sun-Made raisins that has like it's the brown grapes, but then the grapes on the front are the white grapes.
Yeah,
that always bugged me as a kid because I'm like, it's got to be the purple grapes turn into the brown raisins, and the golden raisins are the
white
grapes, but they have them inverse on the packaging, and it always drove me nuts. And But I was like, how many people don't realize that the raisins are from grapes? And then even a step further, like how many people don't realize like where these grapes came from, and that there's like what the grapes were grown for, where were they grown? I don't know where. I just pulled them out of the cabinet. And we've really become so disconnected from that food. And then what you're saying from the supply chain on top of it.
Well, I can't remember the study, and I know we're getting way off topic here, but my wife is a teacher, and there was something about free lunches or free snacks for kids, that the least taken snack, like in her district or something, was raisins. And she was thinking that was because a lot of them, the kids never had them and didn't really know what they were.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, no, like they didn't want anything to do with
currently
raisins.
going through a raisin renaissance. My son's 3, and it's like, well, what do you feed him? Well, raisins are supposed to be. Yeah, again, it's supposed to be healthy, but you don't really know. It's but we don't want to get too off track. But I am really glad you brought up the whole supply chain aspect of it. And I'm assuming the book that you're talking about is talking about some of the negatives that happen in the supply chain of botanical herbs, or is it the opposite?
Well, it's both. It's more describing the challenges. I would say it's maybe a takeaway of the book is describing challenges and how hard it can be to get fair prices to growers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One thing I learned in the book, which wasn't even like a main emphasis, but was fascinating to me, is like just the trade infrastructure that's set up for the trade infrastructure that still exists that gets us spices from India. It's the same it's all the same exact infrastructure that was set up during the colonial era.
Wow.
You know, and my husband and I had already started working on buying more like fair trade spices from India prior to this. And then after reading that book, I just thought, and there's an excellent company, I'm just going to shout out another excellent New Jersey company called Pure Indian Foods, that started out as a ghee and infused ghee company, but they also now source spices directly from India. So we had already started buying some spices from them. And then we're just thinking like, as much as we can afford, we're buying more and more spices that are sourced directly. Cause that's just like, it just really hits you like, oh yeah, like a lot of our global supply was created during like very, just like tragic colonial eras and enterprises and infrastructure and all of that. But that's the way we're still getting this stuff. Like one of my little, I guess axes to grind in the herbal world is like about cinnamon and how we just like take cinnamon for granted. Like I hate when I see people using a cinnamon stick as a garnish in a cocktail. I mean, if you're going to take that cinnamon stick and then use it later, fine. But like that is bark from a subtropical tree, you know, and first of all, it's extremely medicinally potent. And it's amazing that in the Northeast United States, we can just have that. Like that's crazy, you know? And I mean, cinnamon's amazing. I'm so glad we have that. Like I feel very lucky. I'm not saying like we need to not have cinnamon, but I think for things like that, cinnamon, vanilla, you know, nutmeg, cardamom, we need to have so much gratitude for the fact that we can access these spices. And I think we should express our gratitude by doing our best to buy spices, first of all, that are like quality for us, because then you're getting more from them. But also, you know, trying to make sure that the people who are growing them are getting as high a price as possible for their work.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about before. It was on one of my book reviews. Yeah. What was it? This Is Your Mind on Plants by Michael Pollan. He gets into coffee and tea a little bit, but the idea of caffeine. And again, he kind of touched on it quasi loosely, but that was the main emphasis for me was, hey, we have this huge supply chain set up to transport a bulk product from really poor areas of the world. And the people who are actually doing the hard work are barely making anything and getting transported in a lot of cases halfway around the world, just to be tossed in some water and then thrown away. Like we aren't even consuming it. We're leaching out the drug aspect of it and then consuming it. But you have a portion of people that is making this possible that gets a very, very, very small chunk of the pie. But yeah.
Right. And I think that's the thing, like I think when you're involved in, I mean, ideally, like for many people, when you're involved in local agriculture anywhere in the world, you suddenly start to care a lot more and empathize a lot more with agriculture everywhere in the world, because so much of our agriculture is still small scale agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot to think about. You know, for everything that's good, there's always, you know, something behind the curtain that you don't always think about. You think about the positive aspects, but not what it takes to get it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can drive yourself nuts, like really digging into it. We really do say it all the time with the whole native plant discussion is like, once you find some of this stuff out, your spring is ruined when you're driving around. And once you find out about invasive plants and Bradford pears and forsythias and all this stuff that's invasive, and it used to be, oh, look, there's a flowering tree, and now that tree is hurtful to the environment. Yeah. The tree itself isn't bad, but the whole thing is not good.
Or like the less of celandine.
Oh
yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's I'm trying to think. There were some invasive plants. I can't remember which one it was. Where like, well, at least you can eat it, or at least this you can do this with it to do something with it rather than just ripping it out. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't remember
garlic mustard.
Was it garlic mustard?
Where you can eat it and But
people love to talk about garlic mustard. How many people are really eating it? You know,
I do.
Do you?
No, they're really for how much there is out there. There's very
few people eating it. Yeah,
and I don't eat that much of it. My brother eats a lot, but
you're not making a dent in the issue.
No. But
no, exactly. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I did want to ask, for folks that are listening to this, where do you think is like a good place to start? Say they want to learn more about this. Or they're already doing some. What are some like the starter plants that you recommend to people if they want to start growing something in their backyard that then they can use to start their own herbalism journey?
Like let's if we could give our listeners just a little crash course, and maybe we'll pick a few topics like beverages or medicinal properties or food.
I was going to say, those were different questions. So there's like the where to start, what to grow.
Yeah. Well, let's start at the where to start.
We're good at asking crazy questions.
Where to start for our listeners that are like, okay, I'm intrigued. Where's a good place to start for the person that's finding themselves interested?
So, firstly, I would definitely say books. You know, books are a great place to start. The library is your friend. You don't have to buy all the books. And then maybe some select online courses. I don't recommend just Googling free content. That I don't recommend. So I will say, in terms of absolutely intro, Rosemary Gladstar's books are really phenomenal. She has, focus on Western herbalism, and her books are really easy to read and contain a lot of recipes and are very relatable. Or she has a very friendly tone that's easy to read. I recommend her books a lot. There are some good introductory online courses. I think the world of herbalism is completely unregulated, which is, well, not completely, some products are regulated by the FDA. Products that are being sold by larger companies are. But in terms of courses, clinical herbalists, smaller businesses, you really need to be a discerning consumer. And so, if you're going to, ideally a published book, the publishing company has used their discernment. But if you're going to take an online course, you just want to check out, where is this person studied? What is their background? Does their content seem legit? That sort of thing. I have an introductory course, that course I was referencing before. It's called 13, and it's about using 13 herbs and water to cover your basic needs. And that really goes through, I would say, the foundational ways the herbs are interacting with your body, and teaches you what you can do with only water, because, no one's allergic to water. And, ideally most of us have access to it. If you don't, you're not going to be taking an herbalism course. You're trying to figure out how to get water for yourself. So I would say there, I think that, when something feels big and overwhelming, choosing parameters can be really helpful.
Okay.
So whether you're going to choose a parameter that is say Western herbalism or Ayurveda, or whether you're going to say, I just want to learn about the herbs that I have in my cabinet right now. Because if you cook it all, there's probably some herbs that you already have in your cabinet, oregano, thyme, rosemary, orange peel, ginger, cinnamon, etc. You could only choose those herbs and just study about those herbs. And you're going to learn a lot, so giving yourself, or if you want to grow herbs, if you say I have space for a garden and you want to see what can I grow here, or if you only want to grow native plants and learn about native plants, that's a good parameter too. So, I would say either find some books or choose a parameter for yourself and then study within that parameter.
Are your classes online? So anyone listening would be able to take it, or are they all in person?
Yeah, that particular class is online.
Okay.
I have a few classes online, and then I teach other classes in person.
Okay. All right, perfect. I just want to make sure we'll have all that in the show notes too. So if anyone wants to take your course after this, they'll be able to find it.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
So if that's a good place to start, say the next step, someone's like, I want to plant a few things around my property that would be good for me to start. Do you have suggestions on that? I know that's really broad. It depends on what they want to do and what they're trying to accomplish, but...
Yeah, I would say, and also depends on where they live. That's the big question. But assuming they were to live, in a range where I live, say zone 6 or 7, some herbs that are very easy to grow in the garden would be, calendula, tulsi, comfrey, white yarrow, roses, Rosa rugosa, if you have space, is a really potent herb. Goodness, there's so many. Any of the culinary herbs. In terms of native plants, I love Monarda. I think that Monarda is plural, I guess, but Monarda is a very underutilized herb. Goldenrod is a very also medicinally potent herb. Let's see what else is easy to grow. Any of the mints, chamomile, catnip. There's so many, really. In terms of native plants, yeah, Monarda is a favorite. Of course, elder, if you have space to grow elder. Boneset has a very specific use, but it's very medicinally potent. Mountain mint. Mountain mint is not my favorite mint flavor, but of course it's an extremely wonderful plant to have in your garden. And
that's the one native plant I have in my garden that I make tea out of. So I have a little experience with that, and I know that you can rub it on your skin and it will keep mosquitoes away. Yeah. That's about the breadth of my knowledge right there. You're welcome.
One of the things I shouldn't say always been thinking about, but recently been thinking about is I have my little kitchen garden right outside my kitchen window. And I have parsley and rosemary and chives and all that kind of stuff growing in there. And I've been wondering about are there any native plants I could be using in place of those? Do you know of any native plants that are used as a spice? I guess it's technically not a spice.
Or a cooking herb.
Yeah, like a cooking herb.
You can definitely use Monarda leaves as a replacement for oregano.
Okay. Yeah, that actually makes sense.
They're a little spicier, especially Monarda punctata is extremely spicy. Mm-hmm. But, you can use Monarda in place of oregano. Goodness, that's a good question.
Well, we knew it would be a hard one because I think if it was easy, they'd probably be more
I think it's
more found.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's a lot easier to find how you can use black cherry and elderberry and some of these native plants that produce a fruit or a nut, that kind of stuff. But I would imagine that they would be used for spices at some point. Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you had any background in that. Just so that's been a personal question of mine. As I'm not that I dislike my my herb garden, but I'm like, well, could I make this a native plant garden too, in a sense, or have some native plants intertwined in there, and then you're giving back even more. But
I know spice bush, berries can be used the way you would use allspice. I've never actually done that. I've mostly just made tea with leaves.
That's something we'll have to try.
Yeah.
We'll definitely try that. So if you were to recommend a few of your favorite herbs with medicinal properties, what would you recommend?
Always a hard question. Well, one of my favorite herbs that's extremely medicinal that I think we could all be consuming a lot of would be rosemary. Rosemary is a great herb for brain health all around. It's a great herb for cognitive function. It is an antidepressant. It is extremely, extremely anti-inflammatory, and it's delicious. It's extremely delicious. So rosemary can be taken at therapeutic doses. You could take a rosemary tincture, rosemary infused olive oil. If you wanted to make a therapeutic rosemary infused olive oil, you'd make it a lot stronger than one you would just use for cooking. But nonetheless, you could microdose yourself with rosemary every day by having a culinary rosemary infused olive oil and adding rosemary to everything you're going to roast. And just, rosemary is not very water soluble really, but it can be lovely in tea, especially with tulsi and peppermint. And I like to burn rosemary too. Makes a really fragrant smoke. So rosemary is one of my favorites. Nettle is one of my favorite herbs. Nettle should be avoided if anyone's on a medicine that's dosed based on your vitamin K levels, such as a warfarin family medicine. But other than that, and if you have issues with the iron levels in your body, then you might need to be careful with nettle too. But other than that, nettle is very nutritious and safe for most people. It's just, it's like if you make a nettle infusion and have it every day, that's going to be like your daily vitamin.
Tom, have you ever had nettle tea?
No, I haven't. I've considered it. I just
I think I'm stopping at the store on the way home, actually.
It's not like the most flavorful tea. I see that nettle basically just tastes dark green. It's really high in chlorophyll and all this. But it pairs well with other herbs. So if you like peppermint, spearmint, lemon balm, ginger, like I don't usually have nettle by itself. I'm usually pairing it with some other herb.
So how about some of your favorite beverages to make? Like if someone was interested in teas or other beverages, what would you recommend for that?
I love the spicy teas. So basically chais. And so we'll make, and we like, working with mushrooms a lot. So we'll make reishi chai where we're using slices of reishi and then we're adding in all the spicy herbs, so ginger, nutmeg, allspice, cinnamon, cardamom, a little turmeric, all that, black pepper. I love the spiciness. I tend to run cold, so especially when it's cold outside, I love a good spicy tea. But even sometimes in the summer, we'll make a reishi chai and then ice it, and then that's your delicious iced chai.
Awesome. All great choices. I think I feel good. Like I wanted our listeners to be able to come away and say, I'm interested. What are some good places to start or some good recommendations? And I feel like we've really done that. I am curious though for you, like we've talked about the herbs, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that if it does become a lifestyle that there's more to it than just that. You mentioned yoga earlier. How do things like yoga or meditation kind of factor into your beliefs with herbalism?
I think for me, it's this idea that when you feel anything off of center, whether you wake up and you're feeling stiff, whether you feel a little tickle in your throat, whether you're just feeling kind of tense and angry, if you feel any kind of off of center, there's a way you can make yourself feel better. And that might be that you do even 10 minutes of yoga in the morning, or it might be that you say out loud, I'm feeling annoyed for this reason, and you acknowledge why you're annoyed and you take 3 deep breaths. Or it might be that you make yourself really spicy tea because you were at a family gathering and everyone was coughing, and now you're going to come home and you're going to say, I'm just going to eat all the spices, or like drink a really spicy tea that you feel the spices in your throat. So I think that yoga just is part of that sort of mentality for me and that sort of approach to life. That's what I'd say.
Awesome.
Yeah. What are some of the dangers that come along with herbalism? I'm assuming, like with a lot of things, you have too much or the wrong thing, there can be issues. What are some of the dangers that come along with it?
So I would say herbalism generally is quite safe. The biggest risks are, firstly, herb-drug interactions. Most herb-drug interactions are positive. Herb-drug interactions can happen. The negative ones happen if, say, an herb is doing the same thing as the medicine, right? So say someone's on medicine to lower their blood pressure, and then they start taking an herb that is also lowering their blood pressure. Your blood pressure could get too low, that sort of thing. And there are a few very specific types, like classes of medicines that are going to have the most drug interactions. So warfarin that I mentioned earlier is one of them. Or, immunosuppressant drugs, because herbs are tending to really support immune function, for instance. So there's a few really specific types of herb drug interactions. For the most part, herbs are safe. But that is, if you're on especially multiple medicines, that's something I would say, if you want to start taking herbs, find a clinical herbalist, and just talk with that person, because that person's going to help you. Also, I like to point out that there's a big difference between just consuming an herb in a cup of tea and taking what's considered a therapeutic dose of herbs. So herbs, usually you're taking them like multiple times a day. If you really want to take herbs to help a health condition, you're taking them multiple times a day for weeks. So drinking 4 cups of nettle tea a day for weeks is very different than having a cup of nettle tea once.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, when you mentioned the nettle tea earlier for your allergies, is that like if you were to stop drinking nettle tea, would you start having is it something that over time just kind of cures it, or is it something that kind of like?
Question.
Yeah.
So with allergies, I'm going to give you maybe a bigger answer than what you're asking. But
okay.
So the answer to your specific question is, if you stop drinking nettle tea, you're going to feel symptoms again, and that's because nettle has antihistamine qualities, and it can also help to decrease excess mucus production.
Okay.
So it's an antihistamine, and it is helping with the allergy symptoms. So if you stop drinking it, you will feel the symptoms again. Semicolon. An allergic response is that what an allergic response is, it's your immune system acting like something is a pathogen when it's not a pathogen. So it's an overreaction of your immune response. So an herbalist is going to approach that from a variety of angles, right? So there are herbs that can balance your immune response. And that is the sort of thing that over a few week period of time or a longer period of time can bring your immune system into balance and heal your allergies. So from an herbal perspective, a more complete allergy protocol, and I'll say I also do have a class about this, which I usually run in February and March before allergy season. A more complete allergy protocol includes taking herbs over a long period of time to support your immune function generally, and I'll just say that to balance your immune function generally, and then you can have additional herbs for your acute symptoms. So you're doing both.
That's a fantastic answer.
I also wanted to answer the other part of Tom's question is
Sure.
the issue when herbs are not safe. Unskilled foraging would be one answer, though I feel like that is more rare. The other issue is in the US, we have this kind of like more is more mentality. And another way that herbs can be unsafe is if, say, someone hears about something like turmeric or cinnamon or nettle, and then you go to the store and you just buy capsules and you take a ton of capsules. That is going to be unsafe. Like I feel like capsules in a way are the least safe way to take herbs because it's easy to take too much of them. Whereas it's not going to be easy to drink too much nettle tea.
Yeah.
But capsules, it's easy to take a lot of. And also capsules can be very adulterated.
Yeah.
So capsules or just generally taking way too much of something, that is when things can veer into being less safe also.
Yeah. Some of the appeal I see in this personally is the link between nature and your self, whether it's body, mind, all that, which you don't get out of a capsule. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the raisins before. Is like, oh, where did it come from? What even is it? Is it what it says it is? Has it been tampered with in some way? Is it like, was it grown the way I would have grown it or wanted to grow it? Or
It's just you saying that's making me feel like capsules are like the fast food of the herbal industry. It's like it's quick, it's easy to get, it's easy to take and move on, but you're not having that same connection. Yeah. It's not having that same connection as going to the store, picking out, or going to the farm and picking out what it is, or growing it what you want and having that connection. There's definitely a little bit of a disconnect just kind of popping that pill to try to get the same effect. Is there a danger in practices like I know we always talk about pesticides with native plants and what it does to pollinators. I guess I don't know if herbs are being grown for consumption, that they're being treated differently, or you have to be wary of where you're getting or where your herbs are coming from.
I mean, as someone who has a background in organic farming, I feel like that's very important. So I guess a person could disagree with me, but I think most people who care about herbs care about how they're grown. So most herb farms do use organic practices. And I say herb farms as in the types of small scale farms you could buy directly from.
Okay.
We care a lot about buying organic herbs. You know, if you think about even imagine you're buying peppermint, right? Or oregano. That's just being cut in the field and dried and shipped to you. It's not being rinsed. It's not even being rinsed, most likely, because rinsing is good. Like if you don't want to add water. Water is the enemy when you're drying herbs. You're not adding water to that. Maybe some farms do rinse their herbs, but I would imagine that most farms don't. So that's even different than like if you're buying, I don't know, like a carrot or something that's being washed, before it's being sent to you. And then you're just going to pour boiling water over that herb, which might kill some types of bacteria, but it's certainly not. You would just be infusing like herbicides in your tea. And that's really not ideal.
Yeah.
That kind of defeats the whole purpose of what you're trying to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So my next question is going to take us way off topic. Tom, before I ask the next question, do you have any other questions on this topic?
You
see what the next question is.
Yeah. The only other question I had was you mentioned the roses, and the one in particular you mentioned was Rosa rugosa. Are any of the native roses, they pack like the same punch as some of the non-native roses when it comes to herbalism uses?
So the way to know if an herb, if a rose, rose petal, the way to know if a rose petal is going to be medicinal is if it's fragrant.
Okay.
So if the rose is fragrant, you can assume it's going to have medicinal properties. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the rose hips, you just basically need them to be big enough to work with. So obviously Rosa rugosa has the biggest hips, which is why it's an easy choice for herbalists, and it's such an easy plant to grow. But so if a rose is fragrant, you can assume that it's going to be medicinal.
All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither.
Great question, Tom. Great answer. Thank you. So the next question just kind of like sparked my interest while researching to talk to you through your website. And I thought we could talk about gnomes. I wanted to see what you could tell me because I know nothing. And I just kind of smiled when I saw it. I'm like, I want to talk about this.
I would love to talk about gnomes.
Okay.
I think this is one of my personal missions. I would like to give a caveat, which is that I am by no means an expert on gnomes or fairies at all. I'm not someone who has a long history or a long lineage of communicating with gnomes and fairies. And there are people, I just want to say there's a lot of people who know a lot more about gnomes and fairies than I do. Nonetheless, I love talking about them, and I love teaching what I consider to be gnome ecology, which is a very simple concept, which is that if you look out at a space, let's imagine it's someone's yard. If you're looking out at someone's yard and you ask yourself, is there a place for gnomes here? You are going to know immediately if the answer is yes or no. Are there little crevices? Could gnomes or fairies live here? I mean, I'm always thinking about the gnomes a little more, but could gnomes live here? And it's a really quick yes or no. Okay. And I think that kind of intrinsic response is really telling of a place and is going to be telling of like the ecological health of the place, right? So if you are going out to say someone who's growing a lot of native plants in their yard, and you're going to ask yourself, can gnomes live here? The answer is going to be yes. You're going to see crevices. You're going to see little plants that are overwintering and their stalks have been left alive, And to me, it's kind of a shorthand for like, is this place habitat for life? Is this place supporting life? Could insects live here? Could birds live here? Are there going to be, in the morning when you go out, are there going to be little cobwebs glistening with dew and you can imagine fairies napping in them? And so I guess there's a lot to be said about gnomes and fairies, but one way that I like to use them to kind of inspire people's imagination is to think, if you're just looking at a space, could you imagine gnomes and fairies there? And if your answer is yes, you as an organism are probably going to feel happier and more at peace in that space. And you're going to feel that spark of delight, and you're going to feel the sense of well-being that comes from knowing that there's actually life all around you. And if the answer is no, you're just going to feel that desolation of knowing that there's actually not life around you.
I didn't know what kind of answer I was going to get when I asked this. I love this answer because it's very true. Like it's, and you think about like, especially if you're viewing it as far as native plants, like you said, you want to make sure it's habitable, that you're creating or contributing to the food web, to all the different life cycles. And you're doing that if you can answer that question. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I wish Christiane, our coworker, were in here because she wanted to ask about a whole lot of – she's of Irish descent and was like, oh, well, you have to ask about these things. And I'm like, you're way off topic now. But I guess
you might be someone who knows a lot more about this.
Yeah, because she rattled off a bunch of things that were like, you've been holding back on us. We didn't know. We didn't know about any of this. But I would have to – and I know Santino would be curious. This is Bigfoot. How do you feel about Bigfoot? As I know Santino is a huge Bigfoot fan, and we have an axe to grind only because they consistently beat us in the ratings, all the Bigfoot podcasts.
I'm Bigfoot agnostic.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I have, and not it's not that I'm trying to like dodge a controversial topic. Yeah. It's not something I've looked into a lot. So.
Okay. All right. That's a very fair answer. I just had to ask. Yeah. So, what, did you have something to say?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I was going to point out how Fran is always upset with all I'm not even sure what the term to use is.
I think they're miscategorized.
Yeah.
Because they're all in nature.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know can be. I guess in some respects it could be considered nature. I just don't feel it's fair competition to be in the same category. Because we're talking about something that you can plant and see and taste and enjoy, and the other ones are all speculation.
That's true.
So
that's true.
That's my. I would just like them to have their own There should just be a Bigfoot category. Sorry.
Yeah, there are enough. There's enough
that it could just be they can all compete against each other.
Their own category.
Oh wait, are you saying that like in the podcast like apps, Bigfoot podcasts go under nature? That's what you're saying?
A lot of them. Well, you choose your own category, but there's if we're ranked, say we're ranked 20th in Apple in nature, we're the 20th top 20.
Oh, and there's like Bigfoot podcasts at like number 3 or number 5 ahead of you.
15 of the top 20 are Bigfoot.
That's an exaggeration, Fred.
All right,
it's at least 5 to 10. But it's 5 to 10 is a lot.
Half of the top 20 are Bigfoot. And then we are ahead of some Bigfoot, the lesser Bigfoot podcasts, but they're across multiple categories. It just kind of when you're looking at it, you're like, if you subtracted all the Bigfoot category or the Bigfoot podcast out of nature, we'd be in the top 10.
I didn't even know this was a thing at all.
Yeah, that's my little OCD. Yeah. That's a highlight to my.
You're right. They should have their own category.
Thank you. Although Santino disagrees, but we weren't even in his top 5 listened to podcasts. So I just want to throw that out there.
Just to back up, Fran, there was it's 8 of the top 12.
our Bigfoot.
nature podcasts have something to do with Bigfoot or other. I'm assuming cryptids of the corn has something to do with.
I think that's Bigfoot related.
Bigfoot, yeah. Bigfoot's in their picture, so yeah. Also Bigfoot.
All right, let's get back on topic. So we're at, just looking at time, trying to keep us on track. We're at our last question, which is always the same question. It's a very simple question. Sometimes it's the hardest question. And a lot of our guests have trouble picking just one. So we never try to we always use the disclaimer, if you would like to pick more than one, you can. We're not holding it to you forever. You can always change your mind. It could change every hour if you wanted to. But right now, what is your favorite native plant?
Okay, I'll just give you two answers. I hope that's reasonable.
That's fine.
I would say, as an herbalist, from an herbalist perspective, it would be Monarda. I love Monarda. Monarda is, you can consume the leaf and flower. It's very spicy. It's a great herb for if you feel like you're starting to get ill. And it's obviously a beautiful plant to grow. Monarda punctata is so beautiful, just like so charming. And I am always trying to get people to grow Monarda. My herbalist heart loves Monarda. And then in terms of the part of my heart that loves, looking for gnomes and fairies in the forest, that the plant that I feel like fills me with the most spark of delight, I really love native galliums. I love seeing galliums, mostly in the forest, of course. But I love galliums. They're so cheerful. They seem like they have such a fun personality. Like they're bringing little bits of mischief, and just they're really cute. And I like galliums.
That's definitely an answer that no one has ever said before. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that anyone, I know we've talked about Monarda, so it's hard to say if someone picked it. I know a lot of our listeners love, always post in our Facebook group when they're making Monarda tea. And that's a lot of our listeners' favorites. And I shared with one of our listeners, Adam Lewis, we both feel that Monarda Didyma smells like Fruit Loops. Like the smell of it just kind of I don't know, reminds me of Fruit Loops. I thought I was the only one, but I found some brethren in that. So it's those are fantastic choices. Thank you so much. Yeah. So this is the part of the show we always end with final thoughts, and we start with you, but Tom and I will take a turn also, and we kind of hand the floor over to you, so you can use the time however you'd like, as much as you'd like. You can promote something, you can mention something we haven't talked about, you can summarize, but we turn it over, and the floor is yours.
Let's see. I'll say this is my final thought. If you are someone who already loves plants, which I'm guessing that you are because you're listening to this podcast, I would just like to say that plants are always available to help you. Plants want to help us. They want to have a relationship, and they want to be there for you. And that might mean you helping to make your space a space that feels more peaceful and welcoming to you. It might mean helping you to feel better if you're getting ill. Or it might just mean that you're somewhere and you need some advice, and you see a sycamore tree and you say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. Thoughts, and just reaching out and literally just asking for help from plants. Mm-hmm. And so if you already have a relationship with plants, I just encourage you the hardest thing is to remember to ask them for help. And so this is just my little nudge that, whatever you're going through, whatever guidance you're seeking, whatever problem you have, consider asking plants for help.
That is a fantastic final thought. Tom, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Yeah, I can go. And I'll say...
I just realized I didn't update the end of the...
thank you very much.
So I'm leaving it to you now.
I would have screwed that up. Fran, what am I supposed to read on here?
Oh, the back.
This side. Okay,
that side.
Fran wrote a lot of. He threw a paper across. I should have made an airplane. It would have made it. Here.
I always get reamed out for. I forget to update the information at the end of the podcast,
and I reamed you out, Fran.
I get called, not reamed out.
I've been like, Fran, you didn't update this.
Yeah,
as if you didn't do.
So
everything
I was
else.
trying to do it discreetly. But it didn't quite work that way.
Yeah, basically mine was, I think it's a great way. Many of you, like me, have been starting to ask questions about some of this stuff just as we've taken this podcast journey. And that's what, like we were saying in the beginning, it's been 191 episodes, and they've all kind of led us. They're all different. They're all standalone episodes, but
we
a
keep
lot of
taking
them are
different
sequential, and the topics build on each other. And even some of the things that are like a little more far-fetched and you wouldn't think would apply tie in. And there's little tidbits that I take away from each one. But yeah, it's just lately, it's funny that the story about the raisins, it was 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, and I was just making this thing for my son that had raisins in it. And I was like, man, where are these raisins grown? Like, how were they grown? What kind of grapes are they using to make raisins? And like, just started asking these questions, and I'm like, how many people are even asking this question about the raisins, and how many of them just are like, or don't even know that it came from grapes, like I was saying earlier. But it's, it's just, I think a lot of people are asking these questions. I think it's a great way to start to incorporating plants, specifically native plants, into drinks and your food is a great way to kind of join yourself in nature a little bit more and realize, hey, these are not two separate things. We're one thing that are working together. So,
that's a great thought.
Yeah.
And I'll just kind of keep adding to that. It's, what's the worst that can happen? It can make you healthier. It can improve your mental state. All these wonderful benefits. And like Tom was saying, I feel like from the time that we started this, it just keeps branching out. It's like we're taking little tributaries that keep leading us back to the river that's getting wider and wider and wider. And once you know these things, you can't unknow them. You can't unsee them once you see them. But whether this is just another notch in your belt for what you know about native plants or the further part of your journey, or if this is the step that starts you on your journey towards native plants, never stop learning. Never stop asking questions. Never stop taking that next step, because I just feel so thankful as these episodes stack on top of each other, what I've learned, the people I've been able to meet, the friendships I've been able to make, and how I don't know, I feel like I continue on a journey to a better place as I keep going. So I'm thankful for you, Amanda, to be a part of that today. And we really appreciate you being here. And I learned a lot, and now I have more questions, not necessarily for you, but just in general, that I want to continue on. So I hope our listeners are walking away from this episode feeling the same way, that here's something I didn't really know a lot about that I know a little bit about now, and I want to know more. So
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
all right. Yeah, so that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed listening to Amanda Crook from Locust Light Farm. For more information, you can visit her website, which is locustlightfarm.com. Thank you, everyone, listening to Native Plants Healthy Planet. Wow, I'm stumbling over that. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Native Plants Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
We need to put a couple more P's in there for you. Thank you to the Egocentric Plastic Men for contributing our theme music for our Meet the Guest episodes. Make sure you stream or buy their music wherever you consume music. Thank you to Dave Bennett for our Native Plant Anthem. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Native Plants _Healthy Planet, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. We're going to put all of Amanda's links in our show notes so you can follow her as well. Don't forget that we have our question and comment line. We have another comment or question waiting for us for our next Buzz episode. If you call, wow, now I'm stumbling. If you call and you leave a question or a comment, we'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. You can call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Again, this is in the show notes as well. And don't forget about the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. A lot of fantastic posts over the holiday season, and just starting to dig in and respond to some of those, and we appreciate all the new members.
Yeah, so you can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch at our website, www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. I don't have the new design T-shirts up yet. I haven't even started on it.
We just got the logo. We haven't even We just got new stickers made, Native Plants Healthy Planet stickers, 2 new ones, but we haven't even converted our logo over yet.
Yeah.
So we're in the process. It's going to take. Of course, we're doing this at the busiest time of the winter for us, so it will happen shortly.
Yeah, which I will say, if you want one of those stickers, all you got to do is visit us at one of our upcoming trade shows.
Yeah,
which is
we'll be at. By the time everyone hears this, we will have been
next
at
year.
Temple.
We're going to be at the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show in Baltimore, Maryland, and I know a lot of people are going to come and say hi to us there. So
yeah, and then later in the month, we're at the NJASLA conference in Atlantic City. We're doing a live podcast at the New Jersey Total Pro Expo. Tom will be at Plantorama in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. I'll be at the Delaware Wetlands Conference in February.
Yeah. So if you want a sticker, that's a good way to get one.
Stop by
up there and
say
hello. And we made they're a lot better than the ones I designed. A year or 2 ago now. So
we had a professional.
This is a professional. Yeah. But perfect for a laptop, water bottle, all that kind of stuff. You can listen. Oh, yeah. The T-shirts we sell, all that kind of stuff. We don't keep any of the money. We donate it. In fact, a lot of those just went out before the end of the year. So
that's awesome.
And you can listen to Native Plants Healthy Planet really wherever you're listening now, which is probably on Apple Podcasts. Could be Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, really wherever you consume your podcast, you can hear us there. Do us a big favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already, add us to your feed, and if you are able to, leave a review, a 5-star review preferably, and if you do a little write-up with that 5-star review, I give you a shout-out on our Buzz episodes. So it's been light the last couple weeks with the 5-star reviews. But,
it has been. But
we'll see. We got a couple days before we record our next episode. So, yeah. So, all right. With that, thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Amanda, thank you so much again for joining us today and being a part of our family. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Coming up next week, we will have a brand new Buzz episode. Make sure you tune in. And until then, keep it native.
Woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place each family's love. Monarch caterpillars launch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar fall. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To preserve for generations to come, their beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve for earth to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch so stunning can't help but adore. Their colors, their fragrance, a feast for the eyes. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.